From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. Coming up today, K-State's Robin Reid will announce that K-State's county-level estimates on Ark County crop program payments for 2020 production have just been updated. She'll tell you how to access those. Then, from the Washburn University School of Law, Roger McEowen is back, this time to look at two recent U.S. Supreme Court decisions, one regarding a farm property rights situation in California, the other concerning small refinery exemptions to Renewable Fuel Standard obligations. Today's Kansas Wheat Harvest Update features agricultural agent Stacy Campbell of the Cottonwood Extension District. And K-State's Gus Vanderhoeven in with another Stop, Look, and Listen. That's what's coming up on this Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network, and welcome once more to another Agriculture Today, where first off, we'll hone in on new information that's just been posted on USDA commodity program payments. And our guest now has plugged these into a special tool that you producers can use to call up the expected payments under Ark County for this last production season. Robin Reid is with us, agricultural economist, K-State Research and Extension. And the tool, by the way, that we'll refer to is at agmanager.info, of course. But Robin, inform us further what's been released that allows you to go ahead and update these estimates.
So we had estimates out starting, I think, in March of this year, where we looked at projected levels of Ark County payments, agricultural risk coverage payments through the Farm Service Agency. And how we were estimating those was looking at the NAS yields, National Ag Statistics Service yields at the county level. And those are done by survey every year and used to be the source that FSA looked at when they were determining these payments. But in the 2018 Farm Bill, that now directed Farm Service Agency to look at RMA yields or crop insurance yields when they're determining the county yield that they are going to make payments on for agricultural risk coverage. So when we were able to get those RMA yields, and specifically what that is that we're looking at is the supplemental coverage option on your crop insurance. That is a county-based crop insurance program that produces a county-level yield. So when RMA released those a couple weeks ago, we've been working on updating our estimates with these numbers, which should be a lot closer to what Farm Service Agency will actually use for the county yield when they make these payments.
And to fully clarify, what we're discussing here would be those payments due out of USDA this coming fall, correct?
Yes. So just to make sure everybody's on the same page with this, this was for the crop that was harvested last year. So the 2020 harvested crop. It takes an entire year, or even for wheat, an entire year and a half, really, before you get your payment on that crop. And that is because it takes a whole year to determine what the marketing year average price is for that crop, and that determines the payment. So that marketing year ended May 31st for our wheat crop that we harvested last year. And for our fall crops, corn, grain, sorghum, soybeans, that marketing year will end August 31st.
All right. Well, let's dig into the tool that's available to producers. What you have, Robin, is an online map where folks can call up their specific counties and read how these estimates are going to likely play out in those locations.
Exactly. So this is a county-based program again, so that's why each producer needs to look at their own county or their own counties. A lot of producers cross county lines to look at what their projected payments are. Now, what I'm going to say first off is this year we're not predicting a lot of payments, and that is because, no surprise, we have higher commodity prices compared to the benchmarks that start this program off. And how that benchmark is set, just to refresh everybody's mind, this is a program that looks at a 5-year Olympic average of the previous county level yields and national prices. So the last Farm Bill even added a lag year to that. So when we're looking at setting the guarantee this year, it's looking at the crop years 2014 through 2018 to set that guarantee. On the price side, you can expect what that does is give us a low guarantee, because 2014 to 18 was quite low commodity prices. Now, there are some stops on that so that the price can't get too low. But for example, here on corn, we're projecting a price for this marketing year at $4.52 compared to a benchmark of $3.70. So what that means is, for a county to get a payment on corn, their yield would need to be 70% of the benchmark yield for the county. So basically, yield needs to fall 30% before a payment would ever even start.
Is it similar for the other major grains as well?
Soybeans is very similar. So we had a guarantee of $9.25. We're projecting an actual price of $11.27 for this marketing year. So again, yield needs to fall 30% or more before a payment even starts. Grain sorghum is very much the same, only even a higher fall in that county yield, a 64% drop before we start seeing a payment in grain sorghum, just because we're seeing a price of $5.34 this marketing year compared to the benchmark of $3.95. So grain sorghum, as we know, the price has just really taken off this past year.
And you note in the write-up that the only exception to this pattern would be wheat, if, in fact, and that's a big if, that commodity is enrolled in our county here.
Right. So grain, sorghum, and wheat, most of our base acres in the state are in the price loss coverage program anyway. Wheat is the only one that we are projecting a payment to in the price loss coverage program. 550 is the benchmark. We're projecting $5.05, so that's 45 cents per bushel times your program yield that you would be getting out of the PLC program. But there are a number of counties across the state that are also getting a wheat payment under the ARC County program. And I can't tell you geographically where that would be, because it is fairly sporadic across the state which counties had a yield loss to trigger that. So that's definitely something you want to look at the map for. If you are in ARC County for wheat, there are potentially some payments coming for you.
But once more, it would take dramatic losses from the benchmark in yield for 2020 row crop production to generate any form of payment. That's the takeaway there.
Yeah, when I look across the state for corn, I do see some non-irrigated corn payments in western Kansas specifically, a little bit in southeast Kansas where we have some combined counties between irrigated and dry land. Very few counties will be getting soybean payments. I'm seeing just a few across the entire state, and the payments are quite small. Grain sorghum, kind of the same as corn. I'm seeing some small payments in western Kansas for dry land grain sorghum, but not a whole lot across the state otherwise. And again, with wheat, there's a number of counties throughout the state that have some predicted payments, check the map. But, in general, there's just not going to be that many ARC County payments this year because we have such higher commodity prices in this past marketing year.
But once more, it is a general observation. There will be those possibilities here and there in the state. So we would encourage producers, nonetheless, to take a look at the tool you've put together. And as they click on their county, they'll see the benchmarks that you mentioned and some other information on, for example, Robin, the maximum yield that one could achieve and still trigger a payment.
Yes, and the reason we do that is there's still uncertainty around what yield Farm Service Agency will actually certify to make that payment on. So our projections, again, are using RMA yields now, but FSA does have the authority to adjust that yield based on the state committee's recommendation if they see fit. And another source of uncertainty is RMA releases an irrigated and a non-irrigated yield per county. Some of the counties across the state, though, for the ARC County program, use a combined yield. So we had to estimate what that combined yield would be based on the insured acres of each type of that crop. But, bottom line, until these payments come out in October, we won't know for sure the actual number. I'm very confident in these estimates, but we put those maximum yield to trigger a payment, maximum yield to trigger the maximum payment, just to give you a level of certainty onto if even FSA adjusts that yield a couple bushels one way or another, what does that do to your payment?
Just as an important sidebar here, Robin, there has been discussion about the setup of commodity program payments proper, given how delayed they are by a year and given some of the other payment structures we've seen emitting from pandemic conditions and what have you out of the USDA. The actual makeup and operation of the program is gaining a little extra attention, to put it that way, you say.
Well, this is something that has been recognized in the past, but has really been brought to the forefront in the last few years. And that is just the timeliness of the assistance to farmers and the safety net that the Ark County and PLC program provides. And namely, when we had the trade dispute, we saw extra payments coming out, MFP payments, marketing facilitation payments. Last year with the pandemic, we saw CFAP, Coronavirus Food Assistance Program payments. And it was really recognized that this safety net that is in the regular Farm Bill programs is not timely enough to help farmers when they need it. We are going to have a new Farm Bill, hopefully, in 2023. So I'm not sure what we'll see when that Farm Bill actually comes out, but the safety net is being discussed and how it can be enhanced going into the future for farmers.
We're going to encourage producers to take a look at what you have available in the way of this interactive map. You go to the Ark County estimates for 2021 corn, soybeans, grain, sorghum, and wheat payments. That is found at agmanager.info. Robin, thanks for going over the update with us right here.
You're welcome, Eric.
Robin Reid is among those working on this regularly as the new information comes out from USDA and the Risk Management Agency on farm program payment estimates. Robin is an agricultural economist with K-State Research and Extension. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Agriculture Today is back now, as is Professor of Agricultural Law and Taxation out of the Washburn University School of Law, Roger McEowen. Roger, we have two areas of agricultural law we want to concentrate on in our time today, and one resulting from a recent ruling on a case in California. It falls under the umbrella of property takings, and a litany of decisions in this arena have been made over the many years, have they not?
Well, they sure have, Eric, and all of these by the U.S. Supreme Court, by the way. Basically, over the last 45 to 50 years, we've had multiple cases that the Supreme Court has decided dealing with the various types of takings that can occur. Of course, when we mention taking, we're referring to the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. Part of the Fifth Amendment says that while the government can take your property, they have to pay you for it. So if the government takes your property out, an outright physical taking, clearly that invokes the Fifth Amendment requirement that the government pay you what's called just compensation, or fair market value compensation for the property that has been taken from you. And those cases are pretty easy. The outright physical takings cases, we know when the government condemns some of our farmland to expand a road or to put in some type of a utility line or whatever the case might be. They acquire an easement, they physically occupy the property, they make a park out of it. Those are easy cases.
Roger, you note, and you bring this up in a blog on this topic you recently wrote, that it is what are deemed the non-physical takings that become a bit murkier here.
Well, they sure do, and that's where a lot of this litigation has been since the late 1970s. And in a late 1970 case, in fact, in 1978, we got now a famous case known as the Penn Central case, where the court used a multi-factor balancing test to determine when a non-physical regulatory taking is one that invokes compensation under the Fifth Amendment. And so there are a number of factors that the courts look at. Now, they also broke it down in subsequent cases in other realms, still talking about the regulatory, the non-physical takings. If it's a total regulatory taking, they said you could have what is synonymous with a physical taking if the regulation of the property is so vast that there's no economic use of the property that remains to the landowner. That is what's known as a total regulatory taking. They didn't physically take your property, but the government simply regulated the use of of the property away. There's no economic use left to the landowner. That also requires compensation. Then the court kept going through these machinations and multiple opinions on each of these types of situations, which led us up to the current California case.
Which was decided, by the way, a little over a week ago now by the U.S. Supreme Court. Tell us of the circumstances here.
Well, this case involved a couple of farms in California, one in the Fresno area, which is a grape-growing operation, but the lead plaintiff was up further north in California. It was a strawberry-growing operation. They had over 400 seasonal workers and about 100 full-time workers. And there was a California regulation based on the California Agricultural Labor Relations Act of 1975. So this has been in the books for quite a while. It resulted, by the way, of efforts of Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers organization back in the early 1970s that spurred this legislation in the California legislature and then the related regulations. And what that law says is that a labor organization in California has the right to take access to an ag employer's property in order to solicit support for unionization. And under the implementing regulation, an ag employer had to allow union organizers onto their property for up to 3 hours a day, 120 days per year. And that's what happened in this case. You had, it actually originated in the fall of 2015. At 5 a.m., members of the United Farm Workers came onto the lead plaintiff's property in this case without any prior notice at all. They came in a trim shed where hundreds of workers were preparing strawberry plants, and they used their bullhorns to stir up the workers and encourage them to join in protest. The employer's operation was severely disrupted, and so they filed charges against the union for taking access without notice. And in return, the union claimed that the farm had committed an unfair labor practice, and so it gets teed up in court.
And eventually reaching the highest court in the land. What was the original ruling on this dispute?
Well, it, of course, goes to the trial court out in California, and they said that, well, this regulation is not a per se physical taking. It didn't allow the public to access their property in a permanent, continuous manner for whatever reason, which is what is required in California. And so the trial court said that the reg was a non-physical taking to be evaluated under that multi-factor balancing test of the Penn Central case in 1978. And ultimately, the trial court said that there was no taking, and on appeal, the appellate court affirmed. But then it goes to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they reversed.
On the basis of what? What was the Supreme Court's argument here?
So they said the lower court's analysis was completely incorrect. It's not that this was a non-physical taking. It was a physical taking. And the court said that one aspect of property ownership, of course, is the right to exclude others. You don't have much of a private property right if you don't have the right to exclude others. And the court determined that the ability of the union under the law to take access of a part of an ag operation's private property took that right away. And that right of access, even though it was temporary, 3 hours a day, 120 days a year, still constituted a taking. There was no benefit flowing back to the farms of that loss of property right. And so this was an outright physical taking requiring compensation.
Then, more broadly, Roger, is this ruling an important standard for all of agriculture in as far as protecting those property rights?
Well, that's a good question. I think it does push the envelope a little bit further in terms of preservation of private property. This was one area of the law that wasn't absolutely clear as to whether the appropriation of a limited easement, so to speak, constituted a per se taking. The court said it did, because an easement is in your bundle of sticks we know as property rights. If one of those is taken and taken completely, then that requires compensation. And here the court said that this limited right of access, although it was pretty broad, 3 hours a day, 120 days a year, that was permanent when it was utilized, and that constituted a taking. So I think it does broaden the protection of property rights a little bit further than the court had gone previously.
Well, the U.S. Supreme Court has been quite busy of late, as we've all seen and noticed. And another decision by that court we want to spend a few moments on right here has to do with the Renewable Fuel Standard, and under that standard, what are deemed small refinery exemptions to the standard requirements. A quick background on this, if you would.
Well, that standard comes from the Renewable Fuels Program of 2005. And under that program, most domestic refiners have to blend renewable fuels into the transportation fuels that they produce. But the economic impact of the mandate was lessened on small refiners by a blanket exemption from the mandate until 2011. Then the law, the Renewable Fuels Program, also directed the EPA to extend the exemption for at least 2 years if the mandate would impose a disproportionate economic hardship on a small refiner. Well, the Renewable Fuels Association was saying, well, if you got to the end of 2011 and you never used your extension, then there's nothing left to extend. I mean, you're done. You can no longer get an extension. And here in this case, you had plaintiffs, the small refiners, that did initially receive an exemption and they saw it lapse. And so if you didn't use your exemption or you let it lapse and you wanted to extend it again due to the mandate reimposing a disproportionate economic hardship, the Renewable Fuels Association, the defendant in this case, was arguing that there's nothing to extend because you let it lapse. Well, the Supreme Court looked at this, and the Tenth Circuit, by the way, agreed with that argument. It goes on appeal to the Supreme Court. They decide to hear the case, even though there's no conflict amongst the circuits on this. And the court said, look, the reason for the mandate was because of potential disproportionate hardship on small refiners. That can come and that can go based on the market. And so they said that Congress intended the extension to apply based on economic circumstances, not based on the fact that you let it lapse and there's nothing left to extend. You may have let it lapse, as the court reasoned, because you didn't need to extend it due to the economics of the marketplace. But when the economics turn around, and the court pointed out that this market and ethanol and fuels is very volatile, you may need to use that 2-year extension at some point in time down the road, based on fluctuating economic conditions, rather than be forced, and this is a key point, rather than be forced, the court said, to exit the market because they couldn't get an extension, which would then make the U.S. more dependent on foreign oil, which is totally contrary to the whole purpose of the Renewable Fuels Program back in 2005.
Well, again, this ruling was made just a few days back, on June the 25th to be exact, and we likely have not heard the last of wranglings over the Renewable Fuel Standard and its implementation here in the U.S. Roger, we always appreciate the overview of these matters. Thanks, and in 2 weeks we'll talk once more.
Thank you, Eric.
He's Roger McEowen, Professor of Agricultural Law and Taxation, Washburn University School of Law, and he writes on these and many other important developments on his blog found at washburnlaw.edu/WALTR. And we'll be back with more on Agriculture Today. This Agriculture Today continues with today's Kansas wheat harvest report and updates from our county and district extension agricultural agents around Kansas. And we are progressing northward in the harvest and in our reports as we talk now with an agricultural agent long time in the Hayes area and with the Cottonwood Extension District, which consists of Ellis and Barton counties in the central part of the state. Stacy Campbell offering some input on how far harvest is along in his area. Stacy, it's been not unlike other places where harvest got going, then intermittent rain interruptions have put folks on the sidelines.
Correct. Yep, that's been the case for both counties in our district. Guys will get going, get a little bit of rain, and maybe get knocked out of the field for a day or two, and then just kind of some cloudier, higher humidity days. So really, I think there's only been one or maybe two good full days that they've really had. Talking to an elevator operator this morning, he said they're on week 3 right now of harvest. You know, it usually gets done in 2 weeks if everything goes smoothly.
Is this start and halt pace taking a toll on the quality and output of wheat?
Well, I know the test weights, of course, have come down some with, we haven't had big rains, but we've had some rains here and there and yonder. So first it was 60 to 64, and now I think there's a lot of 58 and 59s and a little bit of 60s. So right now it's probably averaging, and I think that's for both counties, it's probably averaging right in that 58 to 59 for county averages on test weights. I mean, the yields, we're hearing some really good yields, I mean, anywhere from below average yields, there's always going to be some of those of 30 bushel up to 90, and one elevator guy told me he said 100 to 110 and maybe 20, and so I said, do you think that's legit? And he said, yeah, I think it may be. So maybe some phenomenal yields as well in places.
What do you think then have been the variables that have created that gap, that difference in yields? Did it have anything to do with planting date?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, planting date, if you got planted really in either county in our district in that latter part of September, there was still some moisture, and boy, it just dried out awfully quick and by the first part of October. And so then the wheat, those fields that were planted after September, the first part of October, even though there may only been, a week, 10 days difference, they just didn't, they kind of came up later. So I think that's been some of the case, and some of it has probably just even been differences in management levels in farming, as well. I know that in Barton County this year, our little wheat variety demonstration plot was double cropped after soybeans, and it was extremely dry when we planted it. It came up late, and quite honestly, 8-10 weeks ago, I wouldn't have given you a plug nickel for it. And we harvested it a little over a week ago, figured the yields the next day, and I was just blown away. It did 50 to 70 bushels.
Wheat can surprise one every now and again.
It can. I talked to another guy in Barton County that had some double-cropped wheat after beans, and he was getting 45 to 50 bushels. So overall, I think yields have been good, but maybe some of those 30-bushel yields I'd mentioned, we've had some hail in some places here, especially in Ellis County, just south of town, actually at the experiment station, the Hayes Ag Research Center. They got hit hard with hail, and it wasn't a real big area, but it went south a little ways and to the west some, and there was some wheat that was baled up out there.
Did your growers have to wage any particular disease battles this year as well?
Oh, yeah, there was definitely a lot of stripe rust, and then I think some leaf rust came a little bit later. And then something, Eric, that I really haven't hardly seen, maybe I haven't really in this county in the time I've been here, was head scab. We had head scab this year, I think at low levels overall, but I went out, after we discovered we had some, I went out to the variety plot here in Ellis County, and every variety, including some that have a better resistance to head scab, there was some head scab in every variety. So I kind of think that probably every field had a little bit of it this year in both Ellis and Barton counties. And then I'm hearing some reports of kind of the combines, this black dust is rolling up now. So with harvest kind of being delayed and some rains in there, I think we've got some sooty mold in our heads and in the wheat. It can really be more cosmetic than anything. I believe if it does get bad enough, it can cause some black point, black tip in wheat. But definitely I think we're seeing a little bit of that too, but hopefully it's more just cosmetic of the sooty mold.
And barring any extended weather interruptions from here on, how much to go before you wrap things up in Ellis and Barton counties? Yeah,
I think both of the counties, as near as I can tell, are about at 70% done. That was as of this morning. And so, if we could just get 2 or 3, good solid days in, I think we'd pretty much be done.
Well, It's been a long pull, but hopefully the conclusion will come soon, Stacy. Appreciate your comments as always. Many thanks to you.
Yes, thank you, Eric.
Extension agricultural agent serving the Cottonwood Extension District in central Kansas, Ellis and Barton counties, Stacy Campbell reporting on wheat harvest progress in those 2 counties to date. And to follow up then with this week's crop progress and condition report for Kansas from the USDA, just released yesterday afternoon, The winter wheat condition as of this past weekend, 65% good to excellent, 23% fair, 12% poor to very poor, with harvest officially 62% complete behind the 72% average for the date. Other crops, corn, 75% good to excellent, 20% fair, 5% poor to very poor. Corn silking now at 18%. The condition of the Kansas soybean crop, 70% good to excellent, 26% fair, 4% poor to very poor. Soybeans blooming now at 26%. That's ahead of the 17% average for the date. And the state of the Kansas grain sorghum crop, 76% good to excellent, 20% fair, 4% poor to very poor. Pasture and range conditions, 67% good to excellent, 27% fair, and 6% poor to very poor. Topsoil moisture this week, 10% surplus, 70% adequate, 20% short to very short. Subsoil moisture, 6% surplus, 76% adequate, and 18% short to very short, according to the USDA. Now, one final break, and when we come back, this week's commentary from K-State's Gus Vanderhoeven. Stop, look, and listen. You're listening to Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. Stop, look, and listen.
They brought back a small part of the wall. I've held it in my hand, and it stood for separation.
That's Gus Vanderhoeven of Kansas State University with comment on life in rural Kansas.
We all know about walls. In our homes, there are walls separating the kitchen from the bedrooms and more. There are the walls which protect us from the outside. We know of the Chinese wall to keep intruders out centuries ago. More recent, we remember the Berlin Wall with its tragic history. It so happened that when the Berlin Wall came down, some of our children were in the Netherlands visiting grandparents. That evening, Oma gave them her car so they could drive to Berlin and see what was going on and be part of history. I don't know how many piled in the car, but I do know they made it, and they made it back. I was home, here, working and holding down the fort. But they brought back a small part of the wall. I've held it in my hand and had my thoughts of what it stood for: separation. We had family, an uncle on Anneke's side who, as a young man during the war, had been rounded up and deported to work in Germany. There he had fallen in love with a young girl. After the liberation, her family was behind the wall, the Iron Curtain. Initially, when they would visit back home, all they could do is see each other. They are all familiar stories for those who are old enough to remember. Then, as time went by, it was made easier, and finally the curtain fell and borders were opened. Western Germany became part of Germany again, and families could visit. The same happened with the coronavirus, with parents in retirement homes. You could wave to each other, but not touch. I was reminded of this the other morning while drinking early morning tea on our deck. It was still early in the morning when, with the shade on the deck, it is very pleasant there to sit. There's that moment when it seems the birds have also woken up and flocked to the feeders or come to the water. You now see the pairs of birds, and especially among the cardinals, of which we have many. There's the chasing game, others being chased away from the feeders or from one's mate. There's a lot of activity by many different birds. There's also the sound of their songs. The blue jay screeches and the woodpecker's peck. and every now and then you hear their rrrr when they attack the gutters. I think they like to hear themselves and make that noise. Rrrr. I've tried to move my index finger that rapidly. I can't do it, let alone move my head in forward pecking motions. But the other morning, there was another sound. It was the cheer, cheer, cheer of hopping. And I realized a very frustrated wren, a male wren, was hopping and moving very close in front of us and seemed very anxious and frustrated. Once I had noticed it, I kept watching and wondered what was on his mind. Amazing that such volume can come from such a tiny bird. On one side, the deck is attached to the garage wall. Where there used to be a door to the outside of the garage is now a window to the deck, and the window lets in light to the garage. During the day, the garage door is wide open. It does not face the street, just a driveway up the hill. Being open makes it easy to enter and leave, apparently also for birds. Over the years, I've watched birds flutter about the high ceiling, trying to find a way out, where it was so easy to fly in. I expect some birds fly in at dusk and find a quiet and safe place to roost. But come morning, they realize as daylight increases, they are caught. That is what I observed the morning when I watched the agitated wren hop on the railing, then clung to the wall, then flutter against the closed window. And it is then that I saw the other wren, the female, clutter against the glass on the inside of the garage and heard her chirr, chirr, chirr. I realized then the effect of a wall where two creatures who are bonded are separated. They could see each other and hear each other, but could not touch each other. To see the inside wren flutter up and along the glass window was a rare experience, as its mate fluttered on the outside, going up and down in a frantic dance. I was stunned for a moment because of all my thoughts about walls which separate. Of course, I would change the situation. I got up and walked to the garage, where the wren now fluttered in the eaves. I opened the garage door wide and hoped that I would see the bird find its way out. It had to come down, out of the rafters. As I stepped aside after opening the door, the early morning light flooded in. The door is on the east-south side, and to my great joy, I saw the wren dive down and fly with rapid wing beat past me. It was free again. Over the last few days, I've seen the wrens hang around the open door of the garage. I must look in the horse skulls to see if they chose to build a nest there. I surely hope they have not chosen the dark engine of my pickup truck as a place to build a nest, or heaven forbid, inside the garage. With the wren, all things are possible.
Gus Vander Hoeven of Kansas State University with his weekly commentary on life in rural Kansas. That'll do it for our Wednesday edition. As always, thanks for tuning in. Please rejoin us this same time right here tomorrow, won't you? Until then, Eric Atkinson bidding you a good day for Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.